Welcome to Routing for Success, the show where we interview today's top logistics professionals, giving them a platform to share their stories and best practices. Today, we are talking with David Delgado. David is a Linehaul contractor with FedEx Ground based out of Indiana. He's only been in the business for 2 years, but has managed to do what many believe to be impossible. He built up his business with nearly zero money spent on route purchases. His initial contract was awarded for absolutely free, and nearly all of his subsequent routes were also awarded for free. The one and only time he paid money to another contractor to acquire the rights to a route was a $2,000 route purchase. That's right, not $2 million, not $20,000, $2,000. David is an excellent example of being a hands-on business owner, and this episode is a must-listen for anyone interested in growing their route business without breaking the bank. Without further delay, I give you David Delgado. All right, we're here with David Delgado. David, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this.
Okay, so before we get into things and before we even talk about you, there's some news that has come out actually this morning. So I don't know exactly when we'll be releasing this episode, but we're recording it on April the 5th. And this morning from the Wall Street Journal article, FedEx restructures to combine ground and express delivery networks. Now, just to get it right out there out front, in that article, it says FedEx will continue to rely on contractors to move goods to customers in addition to its employees. So I know that there's been a lot of people concerned about, if they consolidate ground and express, does that mean the contractor model is going away? And from what we know so far, and this is all very new and it's going to be evolving, I'm sure, it seems like it's going to be a good thing for contractors, I think. But, again, David, we're here to talk about you, and we're going to get into that. But before we do, what's your take on this whole thing?
So, of course, we saw it come across about 7 o'clock this morning, Central Time, and we started reading the article and looked into it, and it's being shared over and over again on different groups and things like this that contractors are a part of. And I think that verbiage that FedEx is going to continue to use both employees and contracted service providers going forward is the key here. There's been some rumor mill about this going on now for some months, and we have seen some influx of express in the ground terminals. In fact, some ground terminals actually have express sorting areas where they're sorting express packages. This hasn't been a secret. It hasn't been something that's under the table or hush-hush or anything like that. It has been spoken about and openly. And so I think it's actually a good thing for FedEx, and I think it's a good thing for FedEx Ground and contractors overall. So it doesn't worry me at all. I think it gives us more opportunity, more packages to move, and more freight to move, and we do a good job of it.
Yeah, and this entire situation will be developing. A lot of the people tuning in and taking the time to listen to this specific podcast are probably already going to know, what's the difference between express and ground. But just to, I guess, summarize it for people, just as a refresher for people listening in. So FedEx Corporation really operates several separate companies under their FedEx umbrella. There's FedEx Express, which at the heart of it is a fleet of airplanes. So if you need to get a package from, let's say, California to New York, it's physically impossible to do that driving it in a truck. They need to put it on a jet plane, fly it across the country. Now, from there are still two separate networks. Express, again, in addition to their fleet of planes, they have their own network of package sorting facilities, delivery vans, and drivers who are employed by FedEx Express to actually deliver those packages to the final location, to the doorstep. At the same time, there's an entirely separate organization called FedEx Ground, which if you don't need to get it there by tomorrow, if next week, as an example, is okay for the California to New York, instead of putting it on an airplane, what they'll do is they'll load it into the back of a trailer. It'll get hooked up to an over-the-road tractor. And that tractor is not owned by FedEx. It's owned by an independent contractor. The person driving the truck is not an employee of FedEx. They're an employee of the independent contractor company. That truck drives across the country, delivers it to a package sorting facility, which is then loaded onto not the express vans, but a FedEx Ground truck or van. And again, same thing. That truck is owned by an independent contractor, independent service provider. The driver is not even employed by FedEx. It's the driver's employed by the service provider. So it's really two companies operating with very similar or the same logos. And what this news, there's been a lot of criticism toward this model because in most areas, there's an express building a stone's throw away from a ground building. And this is something we've talked a little bit about on this podcast in previous episodes. But all of that means that a lot of the overhead is duplicated. You've got two sets of management at each of those facilities. You're paying utilities. There's just a lot of overhead that it takes to run two separate locations, and it's very inefficient. There's been a lot of pressure from investors on FedEx to become more efficient. And this is kind of an obvious one. Well, it's like if you have two buildings next to each other, consolidate into one. If you have two fleets, two vans driving past each other, delivering to the same addresses, just do it out of one van. And it looks like that's the way that FedEx is going to be headed. So, David, I don't know if there's a direct, I guess you could tell me, I don't know if there's a direct impact on the over-the-road trucking side of the business, what you do. I mean, there's a substantial impact, it looks like, this news for the pickup and delivery contractors who drive the smaller vans and deliver to doorsteps. My guess would be that there is a substantial indirect impact in that if there's a lot more volume being put into ground, well, that means that at least some of it is going to be put on the back of big trucks like what you operate. Do you agree with that, or what's your take on what impact this might have on the Linehaul side of the business?
I think it's a bit early to tell exactly how it's going to affect the Linehaul side. However, again, it's the same idea. FedEx Express also has tractor trailers, just like FedEx Ground. So the same way that you have a package car or a delivery van in the same route, you also have tractor trailers, both a ground and an express in the same route. So I definitely see a merging of those two operations as well. In fact, that's kind of what we've been told unofficially, is that going forward, you are going to see a merger of, express packages on ground trailers, and ground packages on express trailers. So I think whatever is more efficient for FedEx and whatever makes the most sense, for FedEx is the way forward. And basically, I think their efficiency is the name of the game here. Instead of sending a FedEx ground trailer empty in one direction and an express trailer or express tractor loaded in the opposite direction, they're going to look at those lanes and try to figure out where can we be loaded in both directions. Because right now there's many places and many lanes where you may go one direction loaded and come back empty. And maybe Express is doing the opposite. So they're looking at those areas and those operations and those lanes, and they're trying to become more efficient in that area. So it's definitely going to affect the tractor trailer side. I think it's going to be a good thing for current ground contractors. Personally, this is my opinion. We do a good job. Ground has consistently been the most profitable entity within the FedEx Corporation. And I think it's because we do a good job. It's because we've kind of got it lined out of how to do this. And I think it probably makes, in my opinion, more sense that you'd see more express packages coming to ground than the opposite direction. So I think it's going to increase our volume.
Well, that's good news for you and me and everyone else who's a stakeholder in the FedEx Ground contractor model. And it'll be very interesting to see how this continues to develop. So, yeah, David, thank you for your insight on that. But we're here to talk about you and your business. Yeah. So you currently operate, or you're always growing and your business is evolving. But 18 tractors, 4 different stations. You've only been doing this about 2 years. And you have an interesting story as to how you've been able to scale up to the size that you're currently at today. And let's talk about all that. But before we do, tell us a little bit about yourself. What were you doing before you had ever even heard of FedEx? Tell us a little bit about your professional background.
So I'm a career federal law enforcement officer. I retired in 2018. And but my family has been in and around the trucking industry all my life. My family owned still owns to this day, a large supplier of like diesel truck parts and heavy duty truck components and equipment in Indianapolis. So the heavy truck industry, commercial vehicle industry, has always been kind of something that I'm familiar with and been a part of all my life, and it's always kind of been fascinating to me. So throughout my career as a federal law enforcement officer, and before that in the military, I was in the Marine Corps. I did 4 years in the Marine Corps and on active duty as an infantryman. And after that, I went into federal law enforcement. So during that whole time, I always had this idea that one day, I'm going to own my own trucking company. I don't know why, but it's just one of those things. Guys that have done it before, it's like an itch you get. Like, it's like the pilots, you want to become a pilot, so you get your pilot's license, or you start golfing. It's just something that you get. It's kind of like that, where it just was always in the back of my mind, and it was just something I could never let go of. And back in the early 2000s, while I was still on regular service to the government, I hadn't retired yet. I started a small company, and I actually contracted with FedEx Custom Critical, and it wasn't very successful. I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned a lot from that experience. And we lasted about 2.5 to 3 years doing that, and we didn't grow really at all. But I learned a lot about the trucking industry and how things work, and what drivers expect, and what the company expects from contractors and things like this. So when I left, I thought, okay, the biggest thing I learned is this isn't a part-time job. This is a full-time job. And trying to balance my federal career and owning a trucking company was just something that it wasn't going to happen. So I thought, once I retire, once I have the ability to focus 100% of my attention toward the business, I will start again. And when I do, I want it to be with FedEx Ground. So that was kind of my thought, and I had that in my mind and in my thought process for probably about 10 plus years, doing research, talking to different people, and just kind of learning what it is that FedEx Ground does and how they do things. So fast forward, I retire. I have a friend who has been a contractor since 2015, and we started kind of collaborating together. And he was basically very supportive in the idea, but he wasn't very optimistic that I would even get a shot. Because there's some idea that, a lot of people buy their way into the business. They buy another contract out, something like this. We didn't do that. Our business has been completely organic. We've been awarded all of our routes and all of our growth from FedEx, and we didn't have to put out any big expenditure of cash to buy somebody else's business. So he kind of laid down the gauntlet for me. He's like, "Listen, man, I'll bet you $1,500, I think it was, or maybe $1,000, whichever it was." He says, "You can put in all the applications you want, and you're not going to get a phone call." I'm like, that was pretty harsh, but I'm a Marine. I'm a go-getter. I'm not one to be like, well, that's that. I guess I'm not going to get a call. So it was kind of like a challenge to me. He was still supportive and everything, of course, and I picked his brain for a lot of information and things like this. And by chance, I run into this guy online, and he's like, "Hey, I want to be a FedEx Ground contractor. Are you one?" And I'm like, "No." And he says, "Well, why don't we work together and see if we can get this done together?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" So we kind of got to know each other a little bit, talked on the phone quite a bit, and we made a plan that we were going to go forward together and start a FedEx Ground Linehaul business. And he was a guy. He's kind of an IT self-starter IT guy, and big in the pharmaceutical world, and helped a lot of large pharmaceutical companies with their IT programs and things like this. And he one day, I would say weeks before we were set to start putting out applications and things like this, he calls me and backs out. He's like, "I'm sorry, I've got this other opportunity. It's so much money, I cannot pass it up." He's like, I'm sorry to do this to you, but this is just the way it's going to be." So I was kind of he was my right hand guy. Like we were gonna jump into the fire together. Now I got to jump in alone. It wasn't quite as appealing as it was going into the fire with somebody else. And I talked to my wife, and she was supportive, and she's like, you know what? We've already got everything lined out. Let's just go it alone, and we'll figure it out as we go. And you know what you're doing. I got complete faith and trust in you. So let's just do it. And so I put in an application and put in a very good, what they call a request for information. It's called an RFI for short. I had it very detailed with a lot of research and a lot of information. I had all their questions answered in detail in that RFI. And I get a phone call and I'm like, well, this is probably standard procedure, just, like interviewing for any position. I'm like, well, they probably call a lot of applicants and I'm just getting an interview. So I call my friend who's the other contractor. I'm like, hey man, I'm getting an interview. I'm not sure exactly what this means. And he's like, what do you mean you're getting an interview? And I'm like, yeah, I'm getting an interview. And he's like, if you're getting an interview, you're getting a contract. I'm like, wow. So I was, I got my interview material together. I put together a really nice PowerPoint presentation with all the information that was in my RFI and just put it together. And I went and I sold myself. I convinced them that this guy who really doesn't have the most extensive experience in the trucking industry is the best guy for the job. And they gave me a contract. It was 3 unassigned AM Linehaul routes. And I told myself that no matter what happens, I'm going to make this successful. If I have to, whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it. That's what I'm going to do to make this successful. I can't allow myself to fail. So backing up a little bit, one of the biggest things I learned in those early years with Custom Critical was I didn't have a commercial driver's license at the time. I couldn't even drive my own truck legally. I couldn't, even if something happened and it broke down and I needed to take it to the shop or whatever else, I couldn't even operate my own vehicle that I owned. So one thing that I had promised myself going forward, if I ever go into this again, I'm going to have a driver's license. I'm going to be able to drive my own trucks and I'm going to know what I'm doing. So I went to truck driving school when I had retired, got my truck driver's license, got all the endorsements that I was supposed to get, went to a company and got some experience. And then I got hired by a company that pulls doubles, ABF, and worked for them for a little over a year. So at that point, I knew how doubles operated. I knew how to hook them up. I knew how to drive them. And I had, not a lot of experience, but at least some experience going forward that I knew what I was doing. And after that, I actually got a job with another FedEx Ground contractor as a driver. So now I had another 1.5 years of driving experience with a ground contractor, and I learned the FedEx Ground lingo. I learned how their terminals operate. I learned how their hubs and stations operate, and I understood that. I even started to get my name out there as far as Delgado. I just call myself Delgado. And when I would come into a station, I'm like, hey, it's Delgado, and I'm here to do this, and that. And so I just started getting my name out there, Delgado. Everywhere I would go, I would just refer to myself as Delgado, and I still do. And with the idea that when my company was formed and when we got a contract, people would already know the Delgado name and would be used to it. And know that I was a go-getter too. If there was extra runs, they were calling me before I ever got there. Hey, can you take this? Can you do this? Can you do that? Yes. If it was possible, Delgado was doing it. And, they would know. I would come into one particular station in particular and everybody like, Delgado's here. And because I was like, I would do stuff that nobody else wanted to do. And that came from, I was standing at the window once waiting for my run assignment, and there's this dispatcher there, and she's distraught. And she's like, will somebody do this? Anybody? Can somebody do this run? I've got to have it covered right now. And she didn't even look at me or ask me. Everybody told her no. I'm like, hey, why don't you ask me? And she's like, well, I know you guys are paid hourly. This particular company paid by the hour, and like, you guys never do extra work. I'm like, ask Delgado, I'll do it. And so she hands me the hook sheet. I did 3 extra runs for her that night. And from that moment on, when I came into that building, she was looking for me. She would even call me before I got there. Hey, I've got this. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? So that's how I kind of started to establish myself and my name within the system. And to this day, we take that very seriously. All my drivers take it very seriously. The Delgado name means something. And the drivers, my manager said this last night to a driver she was counseling. She's like, when you're here, you're no longer, Joe Smith, right? You're now Delgado. That's who you are while you're here. And that means something to us as a company. So you have to represent us to FedEx that way. And we take it very seriously. So, because of all of those things, I think, it's just really helped me develop and grow organically within the ground network. And, yes, about just under 2 years, actually, we actually went operational. Our first Linehaul run was in July of 2001. So this July will be 2 years actually operational, where we've been working. Yes, the company formed in February of 2001, but our actual first trip where one of our tractors hooked to a ground trailer and pulled it was in February of 2001. July of 2001. And so in this July will be 24 months that we've been actively pulling trailers for FedEx Ground.
So you mean 2021, not 2001?
Did I say 2001? Yes, 2021.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly the years go by. Yeah,
right.
I do that too.
Especially for an old guy like me. Yeah.
So, Marine Corps infantryman, law enforcement,
right?
Custom critical, and again, I think a lot of the people listening to this are going to kind of know about FedEx Ground contracting, but custom critical is a totally separate thing that a lot of people haven't heard of. It's what I think is referred to as expediting in the industry.
Yes.
And it's a fairly wide umbrella. I mean, there's lots of different, just because you're an expediter, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone does it the same way. Custom critical is the division of FedEx that might transplant like temperature sensitive medicines from one hospital to another, or maybe even an organ like a heart in like a box that's being chilled on ice that needs to go make it to a heart transplant. Or I read an article once that an expediter with a particularly big truck, they moved a Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton to the Smithsonian. That was a custom critical job. Defense contract, like weapons stuff, all kinds of jobs fall under that umbrella. But my understanding is that a lot of the people who are involved with expediting and custom critical, they're an owner operator. So they have their CDL, they have their truck, and a lot of them are, like spouse teams, like husband and wife, and they just love traveling the country and they don't know where they're going next, because wherever the next job takes them, that's where they go. But you had tried that. You didn't have your own commercial driver's license, and it just didn't go well. So you got out, regrouped, and eventually found your way into FedEx Ground. You were awarded 3 unassigned runs right away, which, did you get your $1,500 bet from your friend, by the way? You better have paid you out on that bet.
Man, I actually called him and I said, hey, do you remember? And I didn't do anything right away. It was probably a year later, and I'm expanding now into other areas. I've got, multiple tractors, multiple drivers, all this thing. And we talk all the time. And a great guy, and we have a very good friendship, and we've known each other. He was actually we've known each other since federal law enforcement. We worked in the same agency and the same field office together. So, I said, hey, do you remember when you said I wouldn't even get a phone call? And he just kind of laughed. He's like, yeah, and he's like, man, it's been awesome what you've done. It took my partner and I several years to get to where you're at. And it's just, your growth has been awesome. And he's like, my hat's off to you. It's awesome what you've done. Now, he has let me use his condo on the Gulf Shores. So I guess that, that makes up for the $1,000. So, he gave me a week in his condo. So I'll take that over the $1,000. I think we're square.
But I just want to underscore how important this is. The way that you got into the business is you sent in an RFI to FedEx. They called you back and you were awarded 3 unassigned runs for free. Now, you still had to invest in trucks. You still had to find drivers. So there's obviously out-of-pocket expense with starting up that business. But just to contrast that to the way that most people get into the business, particularly over the last 5 years, most people who want to get into FedEx contracting, they are ponying up something to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, that they are paying just for the right to deliver the packages. That doesn't include any trucks. It doesn't include any personnel. It's what we refer to in the finance business as blue sky. I mean, they're just paying 6 or maybe even 7 figures from their pocket to an existing contractor's pocket just to get the contract. You got that for free. And maybe there's a little bit of luck, but your preparation met that opportunity. You put a lot of time and research and effort into that RFI. You were prepared and you knew what you were doing. So it wasn't luck in the sense that, it fell out of the sky. You were prepared to seize on that opportunity, and you did. And you got into the business with no out of pocket, at least in terms of getting the contract. That's really important. I think there's an important lesson there for people that, if you're someone that can't or just doesn't want to, spend lots and lots and lots of money to get into this business, I mean, that can be a very scary way to get in because you're trying to make it by the skin of your teeth just to make, basically a mortgage payment on an SBA loan or something like that. There are other ways if you're willing to get creative and have some patience. And I feel like you're a good example of that. And then the other couple takeaways I have so far, David, are, you really hammered home the Delgado reputation with FedEx, with other contractors, and even with your drivers, and getting your employees to take ownership of the Delgado name and as a company. That is incredibly important. Whenever I talk to a business owner within FedEx or anywhere else, something that seems to separate really successful companies from those that don't make it or struggle to get by is employee turnover, employee buy-in. And if you have a lot of employees who basically just view you as a paycheck, hey, I just punched the clock, they're just a paycheck to me, that is going to be much more difficult to really excel at a high level compared to if you can get them to take ownership and buy in, which it sounds like you did. And you did that really well right from the very beginning.
Yeah, it was key. And I tell this to all my employees. So if any of them hear this, this won't be news to them. But there is no Delgado, period. Point blank, 100%. Put a period, an exclamation point on it, put it to bed. There is no Delgado Enterprises without them. They are Delgado Enterprises. I started it. I had the idea, but without them, especially the first few very, very key players that helped me with this, there's no way that we are where we're at today without them. And they're proud of it. Like I said, they're very protective of our company. And when there's, of course, we have turnover rate. We have, just like everybody else, we get the few people that just don't fit our team, and they have a way of washing and finding their way out. And the employees help them with that because they like our company. They want it to succeed. They are invested in it from a point of view that they like their job and they want it to be the last job in trucking that they ever have. And one of the things I'll say, one of them said something to me one day, and I was in Evansville, Indiana, and I had to go to northern Kentucky, which is about 3.5 hours by car. I had a driver early on refuse to take a load. They just didn't want to go to where we needed them to go. FedEx says when you're on the unassigned board, you take whatever it is. It doesn't matter where it's going. I don't care if you like it or not. That's where they need you to go. That's where you go. And that particular driver is like, I'm not going there. I don't want to go there, and I'm not doing it. So that wasn't in that instance. They weren't relieved of their duty, but they were a short time later. But I got in my car. I drove 3.5 hours to northern Kentucky and I took the route myself. And one of the drivers was there, and he'd only been with me maybe a week or so at the time. He didn't say this to me, but he said it to one of the other drivers who's now my general manager. He says, I knew I was in the right place when he did that. When I've never seen the owner of a company drive 3.5 hours, 4 hours, jump in a truck and then take, a line haul run or any run to make sure that we weren't going to fail on that run, because it wasn't going to happen. He says, if that's how the owner is, then I know I'm working for the right guy, because he takes this very seriously. And the fact that I drive a truck, I understand. Now, I don't have the 30 years of experience that some of our drivers have, but I have enough experience that I understand what's going on. I understand their language. I understand the problems that they're having out on the road. I can relate to them, and they see me. I still drive to this day, not as much as I did at the beginning, but I do still drive, and they see me out there. And I tell them, hey, when you see me out there, I'm just a driver like you. I'm doing the same job as you. I help them hook up their trailers, and they help me. We work together. We're a team. And that's how we've built this brand name Delgado and made it so strong. We've had our hiccups along the way. There's no, it's not been all, unicorns and rainbows, but there have been issues along the way, but for the most part, we work together well. If there's a hole somewhere that needs to be filled, one of my drivers will go from one station to another, even if it means spending the night there in a hotel room to make sure that our stuff is covered. So we just have that buy-in, that commitment from our employees. And I think it goes back to that brand name, that effort, that input by me. And they see, one of the key things in leadership in the Marine Corps is you never do or ask your troops to do something that you won't do yourself. And I do that. If nobody wants to go there, I'll go. If nobody wants to, sit out on, and wait for a load to be loaded up, I'll wait. I'll do anything, that I ask them to do and more. And they see that. And so I think that buys, commitment from them, that I'm not just sitting on the beach somewhere sipping Mai Tais, don't know anything about trucking, and I'm collecting fat checks. They know that's not what's going on. They understand that I'm in it with them.
Yeah. Leading from the front. I think that's something that can't be understated, how important that is if you want to build positive culture where your people really buy in, not just to the company and the initiatives of what you're working on, but you as an owner. And,
right.
Because you're right. There's so many, when you think of the capitalist, right, there's the people who work, and then there's the people who own. And that's kind of the capitalist society that we live in. And the caricature of that is, the big guy with the cigar sitting behind the desk, just squeezing people for all they're worth. Your example, he's sipping a Mai Tai, doesn't even know the first thing about trucking. People don't want to work for someone, even, who obviously that's kind of cartoonish, that what I just talked about, but people don't want to work for people like that. People want to work for someone who they know will not ask them to do anything that they wouldn't themselves do. Like you had just said, that was a lesson that I think you said you learned in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. David, what are some other things? I mean, it sounds like you have employees who are pretty awesome and pretty bought into what you're doing. What are some other strategies that you've employed in your company to retain employees and really get them to perform at a high level for you?
So, recognizing your talent, right? Being able to recognize people within your team that can help you get to the next level. Promotion from within. I could probably put out an announcement on Indeed for a manager and probably get somebody with extensive experience in the trucking and energy industry to come in and manage the company or different locations for me. But what I've tried to do is recognize the talent within my own team, and we have it. And a lot of that comes when I'm recruiting people, especially in the early days. I'm looking at people who have extensive experience, who maybe have some management background, who maybe that I'm looking at not just, I was looking at not just right now and how do I get these trucks moving. I was looking at how do I get these trucks moving and how do I use these people in the future to expand our business. So because of that, I think the employees know, and I've sold them this and they know this, the people who helped me start Delgado Enterprises are not going to be forgotten. And I'm not going to leave them to the wayside and just, hey, this is all mine and none of it's yours. Because like I said, there is no Delgado Enterprises without them. And we're looking at ways to achieve that, to basically take care of our founding employees, the people who got this business going and got it off the ground and have maintained it over the last 2 years and are taking it into the future. So that mindset, that model, that idea, it creates loyalty from the employee because they're working on something that they're really genuinely a part of. This is real. This isn't something that's like, wait, he's been in business for 20 years and now I'm the next employee. They're on the ground floor of something that's going great. It has a very good reputation within FedEx and they're part of it. They're a real part of it. And they have a real chance to be part of the future. My very first driver, the one that I told you that took the very first load for us back in July of 2021, he's now my general manager of all operations. He happened to have over 30 years of experience in the trucking industry, more than 20 years in expedited freight and LTL, pulling doubles, had won the twins competition in the International Truck Driving Championship for his state and the company he worked for at the time. And so very, very knowledgeable guy. And how did I get him? I don't know. He called me one day and asked for a job. And my wife's like, I don't know what you do, but don't get off the phone with that guy until you give him a job. She was 100% right. And so people like that, then we brought in another manager for our operation in Evansville, Indiana. Her whole family has been in the trucking industry her entire life. And she helped her mom and dad manage their trucking company and different type. They were coal haulers. They hauled in this area. There's a lot of coal mines and things like this. So they, had 30 or 40 coal trucks and drivers that she helped manage. She had an extensive background and knowledge of dealing with truck drivers. And she knew the people in this area, in her area, and the same with my general manager. So she's now the assistant manager of operations. Another gentleman came to us. He's retired Master Chief Petty Officer from the Navy. So he and I have a very good relationship as far as from the military. He's also he worked for Job Corps for 12 years as an HR manager at Job Corps. And then for some reason, one day he decided to be a truck driver. And he was a truck driver for about 6 years. So it's like, wow, I've got a proven leader of the United States Navy, the highest enlisted rank that you could possibly attain in the United States Navy. He's an HR manager, and he's a truck driver. He's now my safety manager, and he oversees our two smaller operations. So it's just identifying that talent within your own team and showing your team that you have the ability and the potential to grow within the company, and that you're not just a number and you're not just another driver fill in the seat. I'm looking at every driver that I have, and I'm assessing their potential and where they could fit in the future. So I have currently a driver, and he is going to move out of the area. And he's like, David, I really, really like to stay with you. I said, man, I don't have an operation in that area. And I said, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I says, I'll contact some of the managers in that area because we have a good relationship and good reputation in the area that he's moving to. And I says, I'll see if I can put just an extra truck there. It won't have an assignment. It'll just be there. And if we get work, we get work. And if we don't, we don't. I said, what do you think about that? He says, I'll do it. I'll do it. I said, okay. I said, you go there and you prove to those people that Delgado has what it takes. And I says, we'll have an assignment. We'll have a contract. I said, and you'll be on the ground floor of it. So just showing your employees, showing your team that you have the potential and recognizing potential within those people to grow. I think it creates a culture where they want to do better. because there's something for them to achieve. There's more than just holding the steering wheel of a truck and aiming it down the road. There's something here. Like, I could be a manager one day. I could be, in 10 years from now, maybe I'm the general manager now, while Delgado is sipping Mai Tais on the beach. So maybe that happens. So, and just letting the employees know that. But that's one of the biggest things, is that commitment is they're part of this team, a real part of this team, and they can see it. They can look at other employees and say, man, he was just 6 months ago this, and now he's that. So they actually see that potential, and it's real, it's tangible. They can see it, feel it, and hear it. And I think that's the biggest thing we've done to get that buy-in and that commitment from the employees.
Some nuggets there for sure. Tell us a little bit about how your company grew. So you had told us how when you first got into the business, you were awarded 3 unassigned runs. How did you grow from there? I mean, did you take on more unassigned runs? Did you get any dedicated runs? Were they all RFIs that you were awarded for free? Did you pay for anything? Walk us through your growth.
So, correct. Originally, we received the 3 unassigned runs in northern Kentucky, and myself and 2 drivers serviced those 3 runs. We found a 4th driver, and I was kind of the floater. I filled in on people's days off. So everybody had a 5-day work week, and we made a schedule where you were either off these days, but I covered everybody's days off. So 4 people, we ran those runs and covered them 7 days a week. We never had a decline. A decline means you're offered a run, but you didn't have the personnel or equipment to cover it. Decline was not, and for the most part still is not, in my vocabulary. If I can possibly do it, if there's any way to get it done, we do it. And FedEx knows that. That's very key. So we maintained a nearly 100% acceptability rating across those 3 first unassigned runs. And sometimes being in the right place at the right time plays into things. And I think it was about a month and a half in, maybe 2 months in, an assigned position came open for bid. I have known nothing about this. I wasn't really sure how it all worked yet. I'm still learning. I'm still learning today. There's things I learn new every single day. So I contacted the senior Linehaul manager. I said, hey, I saw this come open. Do I qualify? Can I put in? I said, I've been here a month and a half, 2 months at this point. Can I even put in for this? He's like, of course, put in. And, the worst they can do is say no, right? And I've heard that my whole career. Always put in. Don't ever assume that the answer is no, because if you do, then you're deciding that instead of letting them decide it. So I put in, and I got a phone call. Hey, you've been awarded the route. I'm like, what? How is that possible? I've been here. I've got no points. I've got no nothing. He says, you've also got a perfect safety score. You've got a perfect acceptability rating. You got a perfect serviceability rating, 100% across the board. Everybody you're competing with had a lower, they had either safety issues, they had serviceability issues, they had acceptance issues. You're 100% on those 3 categories. And even though you don't have points, you shot the loophole and you got this run. I'm like, wow, amazing. And people were like, all right, who do you know? What did you do? Did you pay for that? Man, I'm telling you, I don't know anybody. I don't have any friends. I don't have any juice. I don't have any pull. I don't have any nothing. I didn't pay for any route, nothing. I didn't buy nothing. I'm in the right place at the right time. And so, we serviced that run and we did a great job with it. And, I happened to be back in Evansville, which is where we currently live. And, of course, I was working in the Evansville terminal as a line haul driver previous to getting my contract. And I'm the type of guy, like, I'll just go in and knock on your door and say, hey, I'm David. Nice to meet you, type of thing. I don't, I'm of course tactful about it and do it in an appropriate manner. So I was in Evansville one day, and the senior manager of the Evansville station, I walked up to the door, knocked on his door. I said, hey, David Delgado. I've just been, awarded a contract over in northern Kentucky. There happened to be some runs posted on Build a Ground Biz for Evansville. I said, I know you don't really know me or anything. I said, but I live here. I work here. It makes sense for me to have trucks here at this station, and he's like, put in for him. And he's like, I think it makes complete sense. Why wouldn't we want to have somebody who's locally? And he says, you do a good job while you're here as a line haul driver. And, I know you're doing a good job over in Northern Kentucky. And now this is like maybe 2.5 months in. And I'm like, okay. So boom, I'm awarded 3 PM unassigned rotations in Evansville. Again, decline is not in my vocabulary. We find the drivers, we figure out a way to make it happen. And now I'm bouncing between Evansville and Northern Kentucky trying to make everything work. We got our equipment in place and we got our drivers in place. Everything's going fine. Everything's going great. I'm kind of telling my drivers we're building that culture of when Delgado driver walks in the door, you ask for extra work. You do whatever needs to be done. We do it to make sure that FedEx is serviced to the best of our ability. So fast forward about 2-3 months in, we're running our 3 AM unassigned runs in 2 unassigned AM runs, our assigned run, and 3 unassigned runs in Evansville. And we're going to Bowling Green, Kentucky a whole lot. In fact, Bowling Green is calling Evansville at times and asking for help. And who raises their hand every time somebody asks for help? Delgado does. So it gets to the point where now Bowling Green's calling me before they would call the station. Now I've got a relationship with the team there, and I know some of them, they know me. And just from having been in there and talking with them. And one night I was in there and I was taking a run from them. I said, listen, if you ever need anything, you call me and I will make it happen. I told one of their managers that. The very next day, they call me and I'm like, oh, here, I guess I opened my mouth. He says, how would you like to just bring some tractors here and run some of these runs for us? He says, you do a great job. You raise your hand. You do. He says, we can't say enough about it. He's, will you come and run this run for us? Nobody else wants it. I'm like, what do you mean nobody wants this? No, nobody wants it. We've offered it to all of our current contractors. Do you want to come and run this run for us? I'm like, absolutely. We'll make it happen. So boom, I'm in the, end of 2021. I'm now in Northern Kentucky, Evansville, Indiana, and Bowling Green, Kentucky. Just like that, just because we really, really focused on being go-getters and going and getting extra work and going the extra mile, doing anything that FedEx asked us to do within our ability to do it. We didn't say no. And so we started developing the relationship. We started developing the name recognition further out in the network, the Nashville Hub Network, the Northern Kentucky Hub Network. And we just become very well known. And I put in an assigned run came open in Lebanon, the Lebanon facility in Lebanon, Tennessee. It's Lebanon Regional Sort Facility called Lears. And I was like, this is an assigned run put out. It was put out on my ground biz as an assigned run. I thought there's no way, there's other contractors that got far more experience than me, far more tractors, far better reputation. I wasn't quite I wasn't quite, I've always been pretty humble, even though all this stuff has happened. I'm like, I probably won't get a phone call. I'm back to my foot. You're not going to get a phone call. I got a phone call. I got an interview, and, like about midway through the interview, they cut me off. They're like, okay, thanks for the information. I'm like, boy, I guess that didn't go very well. So I told my wife, I'm like, I don't think that went very well. They literally cut me off midway through the interview. And she says, well, let's just see what happens. A couple days later, I get the phone call. Hey, you've been awarded this assigned run. Assigned run from Lebanon, Tennessee to Jackson, Tennessee. And so we've been running that now for about a little over a year. And so it just happened that way. Most all of that growth was organic. Now we have bought a few runs from other contractors in the meantime. And, but it was more along the lines of they were very, very, they were like bargain deals. Like the contractor was getting ready to lose the run. Like within days, they were getting ready to lose the run. I was already in the station or already in the facility. And they're like, man, I don't want to lose this and have that on my, my record or my resume that I lost this run. would you like to take it over? You do a better job in this area than I do. Why don't you take it? That way I'm not losing it. So that's happened to me. We've gotten runs that way. And in one case, we paid a very minimal amount for 2 runs, that it was more of a, just so there's paperwork that money was exchanged, but it was minimal. When I mean minimal, I mean less than $2,000 for that transaction. In another case, I had a contractor in the same situation. He's like, man, he says, I don't know what you do. I don't know how you recruit these people, but you're better at it than me. I've never had any real luck. And this is a large contractor. He's been in the game for many, many years. Great guy. And he's like, why don't you just take this run? You do better. He says, I don't want to tell the station I can't do it. He said, why don't you just have it? He just gave it to me. Something he could have sold for, like you said, 6 figures probably. I mean, it's a fairly decent revenue producing run. I mean, it runs, it's assigned, and it runs 7 days a week at the time. Now it's been cut back to 6 because of some changes in the system. But at that time it was running 7 days a week like clockwork, and he just gave it to me. So as you go along and as you build your business and brand and develop relationship with other contractors, I don't want to lose a run. And if I can help somebody else out and either sell it for a minimal price to keep my reputation solid rather than lose something, I might do that in the future. You never know. And that's what they chose to do. But as far as going on to like a website that sells, or you can list your runs for sale, or Facebook or wherever else, I've never had to do that. Thankfully, we've been very fortunate that, because I wasn't a rich kid. I don't have money to just throw away. I had enough money to start this, and that's was key, that I didn't have to put out or sign for large loans, SBA loans, to buy somebody else's business. But I was just very fortunate that I didn't have to do that. And it is possible. You can do it, but it's a lot more attractive to just say, hey, this business is already in place. The equipment's there. The employees are there. The management's there. It's tempting, but there's also a big risk.
Yeah. And, when we were talking about that earlier, David, I probably came across this way. I didn't mean to come across as disparaging to people who spend money to get into this business. I mean, look, I believe that FedEx contracting is a legitimate, great business opportunity. And if there's someone, as lots of people do, if you're someone who has money, you've earned money in the corporate world or from a previous business, and you want to buy a turnkey FedEx contracting company,
sure,
do it.
Absolutely.
There's a different set of challenges that comes with that. I mean, you have debt on your balance sheet or a bunch of blue sky, and you're going to have to make up for that. You don't, maybe you're someone who doesn't have the expertise. Maybe you're someone who is far away, and you're going to have to really have a top-notch manager on the ground who can have those leadership qualities, since you won't actually be there bringing it yourself. That's an entirely different ballgame compared to what you're doing. You are in the trenches, getting your hands dirty every day. It sounds like, every employee you have working for you, you have a personal relationship with. They know
Correct.
you, and you've been rewarded for that. And so you did buy routes for $2,000, which is basically nothing. And you've basically just, you've grown truck by truck, and you've done a really great job with it. David, one of the things that you and I had spoken about leading up to this call was you really pride yourself on your ability to sell yourself to FedEx. Now, you've already talked about how, having perfect safety, acceptance, and serviceability ratings, hey, if you want to get the job done, call Delgado, really positioning yourself that way. Tell us a little bit about, though, when you get into one of these interviews, what's your approach when you're sitting across the table from somebody at FedEx and they have to decide, who are we going to award this to? It seems like you have a pretty good track record of selling yourself and your company and being selected as the one that they're going to award it to. Tell us a little bit about how you do that.
Yeah, so it may sound like I'm bragging, but I'm saying this not to sound that way. I've never put in yet an RFI for a position that I didn't get. So the first thing is I assess the situation, and can I actually provide the best service and or provide service at all. So I don't just shotgun out, resumes. There's some legwork that goes into the area, right? I know the management team. I know how they operate. I know the facility. I have some inside information so that when I go to an interview, I can speak their language. Not necessarily know them so that they know me and they're doing me a favor. Not that at all. What I mean is I know the facility. I know their operation. I know their team, and I can present myself as kind of knowing them. Now, that didn't happen in the first couple of interviews, obviously. The first couple of interviews, I just had to sell myself as me. Going forward, after I got some experience and some knowledge and in the industry and in these facilities, now I focus on knowing their operation and knowing what they're doing, knowing what areas and what lines or what line haul routes they might be struggling in. And how do you know that? Because they ask you to cover it all the time. Even if it's not, like if I go to, I don't know, Terre Haute, Indiana, for example, excuse me. And they're like, hey, Dave, can you run to Indianapolis for us? Absolutely, we can do that. Go up there another couple days. Hey, can you run to Indianapolis for us? Yeah, absolutely, no problem. Hey, can you run to Indianapolis? And it starts to become a recurring theme that they're always asking us to run to Indianapolis, right? I know they've got coverage issues in the Indianapolis lane. Either they've got more volume than they have power for, or somebody, maybe a contractor's not fulfilling their contract appropriately. Something's going on in that lane that I know. So I know that information. I start to gather that information, and I speak, and I can speak to them and understand what's happening in their station. And what I want to do is present myself as a solution to their problems instead of is this guy going to make it? Or is this guy know what he's doing? I don't, when I come in and when I talk to them, I'm the one they're looking for. I present myself that way, and I sell our company and our service to them individually on each individual occasion. Is that here's why, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. You go to bed tonight and don't worry, I've got this. Right? You don't have to worry about my drivers. You don't have to worry about my equipment. You don't have to worry about, we're going to figure it out. Now, of course, things happen. I understand that. And they get that too. They completely understand that. But they don't want to have to babysit you, right? They don't want that at all. If they have to babysit you, they're going to find somebody else. They want people who can, take care of themselves, know their job, and know what they're doing and how to get it done. And I just present the information. I know what I'm talking about. I know what information they're looking for in the interview process. I know the answers to the questions that they're going to ask me. And I have information that I can share with them as how we can specifically help them. So when I leave an interview or when I talk to them, they know that if they bring my company on and our team on, that whatever issues that they're having, or that there's going to be a solution, not a continued problem. And they're going to get more from me because I sell the rest of my network, and I try to position it where my network can help. We can help each other. So my drivers in one location can help the drivers in another, and we overlap each other. So my Northern Kentucky drivers come to Evansville. My Evansville drivers go to Northern Kentucky. My Evansville drivers go to Bowling Green. My Bowling Green drivers go to Lebanon. My Lebanon drivers go to Bowling Green. So we have a network just like FedEx has a network. And if that model works for FedEx, and it does, then it should work for us too. And I think that the contractors need to think about it that way. You're working for a company that has this hub and spoke network. You need to have a hub and spoke network in your organization too to help that company. So you kind of model it. I've modeled it the same way where I have overlap, and that's really important because if something happens, I've got to come in and take care of my own problems, or I want to for the most part. I don't want to call somebody else to help me. Not that I'm below that. It's okay. I've helped other people and people have helped me, but for the most part, I want to take care of my own problems so that they don't become somebody else's. So, in the interview process and in going forward and building the relationship and letting them get to know me, I show them that I'm the person. And by reputation and by just, presence and everything else, that I'm the guy that when they call, if they give something to, like the Jackson run, they know we've never failed on that run. We've never declined it. We've never failed on it in a year. We've ran it 100%. And they know that, whether that means I bring myself down to run it or another driver from another place to run it or whatever it is, we're not going to fail. And they know they can put it to bed. They know they don't have to worry about it. They load the trailers and Delgado has it. So that, whether you're a delivery van, a step van driver or a line haul contractor, know that when FedEx puts the package or the trailer on your vehicle, they don't have to think about it again. And you have to get them to buy into that. And you show them that through your own reputation, your own previous experiences in life. For me, I think coming from a federal law enforcement background with a top secret clearance, they don't just give that to anybody, right? I've gotten years of experience of proving myself that I'm reliable and that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So I think initially that played a huge role in getting those first 3 runs is like, I'm reliable. Not only am I reliable, there's proof that I'm reliable. I know what I'm talking about. I've got experience in the industry. I got experience at FedEx Ground. I know their language. I know some of the people in that terminal. My name is recognized in that terminal. So all these little pieces, building it together, building a very strong foundation from which to build from is what we did and what we continue to do going forward, and how and we use that foundation in these interviews to get where we want and how and to expand.
You're in the problem solving business.
Yes.
Yeah. David, this is good stuff. I want to be mindful of our time. Is there anything else that you want to talk about while we're here?
I think what I'd like to just for everyone to know, whether you're a P&D van driver, or whether you're a line haul contractor, or whether you're a potential P&B contractor or line haul contractor, is really get to understand and know what the business is. And I did that by becoming a line haul driver myself. I learned what was going on. A friend of mine was kind of thinking about getting into the FedEx Ground business, and their son had some experience in business operations and things like this, and they wanted to go the P&D route, try to grow things organically, or maybe even buy a P&D van operation. I said, okay, before you do anything else, personally, I said, tell him to go get a job as a P&D van driver with another contractor in the area. I said, because he's going to learn everything that his drivers are going to experience, and you have to have that. I got a text this morning. I don't know what time it was, 5:00 from one of the drivers. I don't really like that to happen, but because they have this relationship with me, they sometimes will call me in the middle of the night and tell me something that they were really proud of that they achieved. We're trying to get away from that going forward, but right now they still do that from time to time. And if they call me and I can't understand what's going on in their world, it's really hard for them to feel loyalty to the company and to me. I understand that. And I think that's key, very, very key for anybody, is to go out and actually do the job. I can run any route that we currently have. And I have run every single route we currently have, whether it be unassigned or assigned or what I wrote. I've done all of it. And I would encourage any owner, if it's possible, I know every situation is different, but especially somebody who's growing organically like I did, know the job, know the routes, and be able to jump in the seat and run any one of them, whether it be a P&D van run or whether it be a line haul run at any time. I think it's key that you're able to do that. It's very, very important that you're able to do that.
I think that's a good place to sign off. David, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me. And thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me on. A little plug to AP Equipment Finance. Without them, I wouldn't have gotten started in this. One of the things back in the beginning was, where is a guy with no trucking experience and no commercial vehicle equipment financing background? Where do I go? I was introduced to AP by somebody, and Spencer, he's my guy now, and we have 13 tractors financed with AP Equipment Financing, and it was that. And you didn't ask me to do this plug, but I'm just doing it because I do owe some of our success to the ability to get the equipment that we need to do the job. And AP was key in that, and a low down payment, not cutting into my capital in a big way, that I could retain more of my operating capital. Because like I said, I wasn't a rich kid. I'm just a kid from Chicago originally, and I had a little bit of money, not much, and I went for it. And AP made that possible for us.
I'm really thankful to hear that, David. I appreciate you saying that. We're in the business of providing leverage. That's an actual term in the finance business, but if you just think about it conceptually, in your business, you're doing all the heavy lifting. You're going out every day, and you're giving a tremendous effort to try to be successful in your business. And all we're doing is we're providing you just a little bit more leverage, so you get a little bit more bang for your buck, a little bit more result for that effort. So, and it's one of the things that's very fulfilling for me is conversations just like this one, where we can help even just a little bit to help small business owners be successful and achieve financial independence or whatever your goal is. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
No problem, Ryan. Thank you very much. It's a great opportunity, and thank you so much again.
Routing for Success is brought to you by AP Equipment Financing. In today's competitive market, it is essential to acquire the right trucks at a fair price and finance them in a way that makes sense for your business. Leveraging their extensive network of truck and van suppliers, the experts at AP Equipment Financing will help you locate the best deals on step vans, cutaways, panel vans, and more. Deliver them straight to your facility and finance them with low monthly installment options. Click the link in the description or visit apfinancing.com for more information. Routing for Success is an independent production of AP Equipment Financing and is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by FedEx Corporation, FedEx Ground, Amazon, or any other logistics company discussed herein. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Routing for Success.